Welcome to the Music EdQuity Chat Show, a show for music educators to go beyond the surface, to have deeper conversations about how we can reimagine music education to be diverse, inclusive, and culturally responsive for all of our students. My name is Ashley Cuthbertson, and I'm your host of the Music EdQuity Chat Show. I'm a music educator and the founder and CEO of A. Cuthbertson Consulting. We're an educational consulting company that helps music educators improve their instruction by centering equitable and culturally responsive practices so all learners get the high quality music education they deserve. And tonight I am so excited to be welcoming my friend Dr. Latasha Casterlow-Lalla to the show to talk about equitable music programming. Welcome, Latasha, and thanks for being here.
Thank you, Ashley. It's so good to see you again. Spend some
Yeah,
time talking
it's
about all the good things we love to talk about.
I love it. I love it. And I think since we last were together, you officially graduated with your doctorate, right?
Almost, girl, almost.
Almost
4 days
4
officially.
years.
It's
Yay.
done, but 4 days official. But
Okay,
it's
awesome.
exciting. I'm really looking forward to it, and I gotta tell you, I can't believe it's here.
Awesome. I love it. Well, congratulations, doctor. And only 4 more days until it's like, I guess what, like official, but it's like kind of official now.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you, my friend.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I love it. I love it. All right. Well, let's jump into our conversation tonight. So, Dr. Latasha and I are going to be talking about equitable music course programming. But first, Latasha, if you could just let the people know a little bit more about you, who you are, and what you do.
Oh, well, thanks. So I'm Dr. Latasha Casterlow-Lalla. I still get used to saying that. So I am this incredibly passionate person who really believes in the power of arts education and the way that arts education can really evolve and change ourselves. It changes our students, and it evolves our communities. And so I'm super passionate about making sure that we have equitable access to arts education that's consistent and sequential. And I'm really, really focused on making sure that that instruction really focuses on letting our children see who they are and who they can be and make connections to what is critically important to them and the world that they live in. So am, I say I'm a wife, I'm a mother of three, I'm a dog mom, I'm a proud 25-year member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Um, and I'm just a person that's really committed to the work of making sure that arts education is there for students and really helping others see the impact of the arts on our everyday lives. That it's not a moment, it's not an episode or just a show. It's really a reflection and a documentation of our society and all that we bring to the table. So that's me. Oh, I'm a doctor. I'm gonna put some respect on that.
Yes, I love
Um,
it.
yeah, and I worked hard to do it, and I did it for myself, but I also did it to model to my two daughters, to my son, to my nephew, to all of those who are out there that, once you put your mind to something and you discipline yourself and commit, that
Mhm.
anything is possible,
Yeah.
and you can manifest whatever it is that you want.
I love that. I love that. And I was actually thinking today as I was looking through our what we were going to talk about today, and knowing that like like you're 4 days away from being official doctor. I don't know if it's just because I am very intentional about just the people in my circle, the people that I allow like information to go into my mind, but I realized something, but I know so many Black women with doctorates, like so many. And I'm also aware of the fact that it's still a very small percentage. But I love that you just said that putting your mind to it, anything is possible. And I'm loving that so many more of us are being represented in that space. And I think it's so important for young kids, young women, right, who are coming into this world, this education field, especially to continue to see all of the beautiful role models like you who are doing it. I love this. And I love that there's continuing to be more representation. I think that that's so
Yeah.
important. One
It's
thing that you said just now that I love is that the arts is not an episode. It's not a show. It's
yeah.
part of our life. And I would love to talk a little bit more about that before we jump into talking a little bit more about the beautiful work that you're doing in Passaic, New Jersey. Which I can't wait to talk more about the wonderful things that you've done in Passaic as their art supervisor. But I love this this idea of us really reminding folks. I think especially parents, community, folks who are not music teachers or arts teachers, you see the end product of what we do,
Right.
but you don't see the process. And I always would say to my students when I was still teaching in the classroom that really the process is the most important part, because we're going to spend months potentially preparing for a show that we're going to do or a concert that we're going to do. And then that one little snapshot in time, right? That 1:30 to 45 minutes is going to be it. But so much work went into that. I would always say to my kids, like, no matter how the show goes, like we work hard, and that's really the more important thing. And so I love that you highlighted that, because I think so many people, when they think about the arts, they think about the show, or they think about the art showcase, or they think about the play or the musical, but they don't realize so much goes into it ahead of time. And really, it's that process where kids are gaining those great, wonderful skills to communicate, to collaborate, to think critically. That's where it happens. Like, it doesn't happen in the show, like that 45-minute, like they didn't develop the skills there. They developed the skills all throughout this process that we led them through.
Right. It's so critical that people understand that, right? And so I often champion the really important part of the national core art standards. And for me here in New Jersey, the New Jersey student learning standards. And I was privileged enough to serve as a member of the writing team for the standards. And in being in that process and really trying to disaggregate the essential components of it, what I found was that we just aren't actually championing the importance of how standards can guide us so far. And so when we think about the process, the actual standards are written from the perspective of these 4 artistic processes, which are creating, connecting, responding, and producing. And so for us, in the performance world, it's, performing. But it's producing, it's presenting, it's performing, it's all of those things. And so the thing is that the learning for us is not in the performance. It's like you said, it's everything working up to that. And so I'm really, really, really focused on helping people understand that you enjoy the fruits of the labor, but that labor is completely chocked full of skills and techniques. They are absolutely essential to the day-to-day work that we do. And it's really important that people understand that students are learning in, I call it in practice form. So it's like really applicable learning every day. So it might look like play. It might look like fun. And there is a component of that is there. But those students are working so diligently to master a specific technique or skill that is going to give them better access to being a stronger musician. It's kind of like building a toolkit. And so, sure, you enjoy the actual show and you recognize the song, all great stuff. But it's really, the point of arts education is really developing and building those skills. And then we take the culmination of those skills to produce something that may be enjoyable to people.
Yeah. And that we hope is enjoyable to them. But I think also we hope that our students, like you just said, learned all those important skills and techniques and things that they'll be able to then utilize in the next performance that they're putting together, or the next thing that they're producing and such. So I think for me, when I was working with my students, that was always the biggest thing, is like, I want them to have the skills to be able, at the next time that we do this, I want to have put in the work with them to develop these skills such that the next time that we have our next choir performance, they're able to shoulder more of the planning, more of the decision making, because we've practiced it, right? They don't need me to guide so much of the process because I've modeled for them how to go through the process. And now they have the skills to do that. They can really start to take good ownership over the work that we're doing, because now they've gained the skill to be able to lead that work themselves. And I think that's an important piece that I think our audiences don't always know or see. And I think that for many of our music educators that came up in a very traditional way of learning, stood in the choir, their teacher picked the music, their teacher figured it out. I think sometimes can be difficult for teachers that came up in that traditional way. And that's me too. I came up in a very traditional kind of music program. It can be hard to kind of rectify the need to make sure that, yes, we have these great productions and concerts and performances, but we also need to be teaching the skills and actually putting the time into teaching the skills and the concepts makes for a better experience in the long term. It might not be in the short term. In the short term, it might be a little rough, but in the long term, it's going to be better learning for the students and thus a better product that they'll be able to develop. Yeah.
Oh, that's, yeah. I mean, it's the essence. And one of the most important things that I think is so important that we articulate is that to develop skill and technique, just like in anything where somebody's a practitioner, it requires time. And that's one of the things that for music education, arts education is so important for people to understand. You do not get works of art from somebody having something for a very short period of time. It often takes diligence, practice, energy, consistency for them to do that work. And then after hours, like, you know, it's that whole thing, like 10,000 hours makes a master. After that time frame, you're able to come into your own, trust your abilities, your skills, and your technique, and really be able to produce and to create. And so it's one of those pieces that we really need to help folks understand. It's why we need the time and the space to have strict arts education in schools. It's so important with adequate time. Our kids need it. And it's one of those wonderful things where you get to go and express yourself, to share your perspective. And that's something that we need within our world, like the richness of all of these amazing platforms that we utilize, from music to movies and television shows, from social media, is because there's a space where we can self-express, either as an active participant or as somebody who is maybe inactive or a watcher or a supporter. We're all trying to be seen and heard. Our students are too. And the arts are just another amazing way to do that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Awesome. Well, let's talk a little bit about what is equitable music course programming. So how would you define that? Somebody were to say, tell me what is an equitable music course? How would I program that? Like, how do you define that?
Equitable music program. I think it's a program that allows students to have access to what's exciting and fun for them, that's interesting and thought-provoking, and connected to strong foundational skills. So it's all of those things, right? And one doesn't, you know, kind of outweigh the other. It's something that's comprehensive. And the great part about having equitable, you know, music education is that it allows folks to have some space to join, right? To be a part of the process. And being a part of the process, every time I'm a part of the process of something, I have more interest because I can be seen and heard in it. Right. And we want to do the same thing for our students, right? We want to make sure that they have the opportunity to be seen and to be heard. Because when you're more vested into something, you take more ownership. And when you take more ownership, you become a better part of it.
Yeah. I love that. I love what you said about it makes space for people to be able to participate and join. And I think especially when we're considering how do we make sure that students feel that sense of belonging in our music programs? How do we make sure that they feel like this is for them? I think making space for a variety of ways for kids to be able to engage, I think that's the way, right? If we make it so closed, I think it's hard for, especially our students, as we were like in this weird, not post-pandemic, because I don't think we're post, but in this weird kind of time where we're like, we're out here again. But I think a lot of our kids have seen through virtual learning at home, being on the phone and all the social media, I think that they have seen so many ways that they can engage in music and the arts that I think that we are at a point now where to continue to hold on to these very traditional ways of engaging in music education, we're going to continue to see a decline of students who want to be in our programs, because not only do they not feel a sense of belonging, they don't see a space for them, they also know they can go over here on TikTok and they can engage in a completely different way. And it's like, what are we doing to keep up with the times to still make space for a variety of ways to engage in music, right? We want kids to be engaged in the arts, period. Like I would always say to my colleagues, like, If they're in my music class or my extracurricular choir, I'm happy. But if choir's not their thing, I want them to do something else, right? I want them to still be involved in the arts. So how can we have a variety of offerings? Because choir is not going to be everybody's thing. Band is not going to be everybody's thing. Orchestra is not going to be everybody's thing. But everybody loves music. Like that's a part of being a human being. Everybody loves the arts. Maybe you're not one to want to perform musically, but you want to produce visually, or you want to be in a dramatic. Like, there's a way for kids to have a place. How can we make space? And I love that you mentioned that. So can you talk to us a little bit about what led to your passion, particularly in providing music course offerings, especially in Passaic? What led to you being really passionate about having a variety of course offerings that both reflect traditional styles, but also the more modern genres as well?
So it was an interesting path, right? So I've always been really focused around making sure that we have music that folks can see and hear, and making sure that we were being inclusive. And so for me, the real big initiator was during the pandemic. We were remote as a district. We were remote for 18 months. And so we had some time. We had some time to sit. We had some time to think and to reflect. And it was really for me in thinking about what life was like after the George Floyd murder. And you hear my dog, because he wants to be a part of this as well. Okay?
That's real life, real life.
That's my baby Jack.
Live show.
Right? Come through. So, and I thought about what we were doing from a perspective of the arts after the George Floyd murder. I really took a real deep dive at our curriculum. And as much as I'm a champion for being diverse and making sure we're being inclusive and make sure everyone gets to see each other, I very quickly realized in looking at my documents that did not reflect what I felt.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay, we need to completely overhaul. We need to overhaul everything that we do, everything that we work on, who we are, and what we present. And so what I did was I said, well, what are we missing? What are we missing? And what are we doing? And so I said, okay, what's out here? What's not here? What isn't present? And we really started saying, what are the genres that we want to talk about? And what we started to think about was when we looked, we didn't talk about anything. We were still doing the same thing that I did as a kid. And we live in a very different society.
Yeah.
We live with folks that look different. And so I went back to my own experiences as a music teacher, as a music student from my secondary level and also my post-secondary level. And it's like, I hated the fact that the music that I was listening to and I was dancing to and I was partying to was not in school. Yeah. And I said, how could I say that I'm going to be a change agent if I'm not putting that change? Yeah. So I just said, okay, we're throwing everything out. And so I decided to look at and explore with a team of teachers how to infuse popular culture into our music program. And so we started out with a list of about 75 genres of music. And we said, okay, that's it. We're going all the way in. And we actually said, can we teach the things that we think that students need to learn without touching classical music? And that's radical, right? It's radical because a lot of people say, well, that's the foundation. I get it, but it isn't, right? There's more to the boat. And so what I said to myself was, everything that we're doing is actually a representation because that is the foundation. Right. And so we really took a shift from focusing on, I'll call it the classics, to talking about the elements of music. And once we started doing that, it doesn't matter who's the singer, the beat, the language. We are talking about music because if it has melody, if it has beat, if it has rhythm, we're good. Right. And we then narrowed that huge list of genres down to about 20 genres. And we talk about everything from hip hop to metal, pop to show tunes, country. And then we started getting a little more granular and really exploring, well, country pop, country rock. Okay. And then what we wanted kids to walk away from it was an appreciation. So the big part of this was we live in a society right now where we have playlists. And playlists are awesome.
Yeah.
But you can exist and never hear something.
Mm-hmm.
You never have to explore something if you don't choose to.
Right.
And I remember being a child, right? I grew up here in the New York City area where you listen to, I mean, listen, we only had like a good 4 or 5 stations. We had WPLJ, we had Z100 and Kiss FM and Hot 97 and BLS. And if they liked the song, you listened.
Right.
That's it, whether you wanted to or not.
Yeah.
And it's like, wow, would I've ever really heard Hall & Oates
Mm.
if I wasn't listening? Because you didn't have choice at that time.
Right.
So
Right.
I wanted to bring back a space where students didn't get the choice to say, I don't want to hear that. But I
Mhm.
wanted them to be a musical consumer so that they could say, here's why I don't particularly care for that.
Ooh,
I
that's
don't like the rhythm. It doesn't hit well for me. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It gives me anxiety. Or, oh, I think that beat is too strong. I don't like downbeats. I like upbeats.
Mm.
And so now when you're telling me you do and you don't like something, you're speaking at it from academic vocabulary and language,
Yes.
and you're pushing forward and really kind of developing your critiquing skills. So we're working on a musical piece. That's our vehicle. But if
Mhm.
I'm giving you critiquing skills, you're going to be able to use that in any other subject. You're going to be able to use that critically in your life. So that transfer skill is really important. So that's kind of how we came to it. And we're in now year 4
Yes.
of this program, and kids are loving it. They love our K-pop units because K-pop is super huge in our community.
Yeah.
They love hearing music from their families. Like, oh yeah, my aunt loves that song. We play that song. That's a family song. Or I've never heard that and I don't want to hear it again. And we're
Mhm.
like, okay, but at least you know it, you've heard it, and now you've developed an opinion.
Right. And you've been now exposed to it, and maybe you don't like it, that's fine, but you don't know what you don't know. I love that. So many things that you just said. I loved it. I wrote a couple of them down. I want to come back to a couple of the points. So I love this idea. I talk a lot about what if we just reimagined how music education was, right? But instead of just going along with the way that we've been doing it, which has not been serving all of our students, and we know that.
Absolutely.
What if we just reimagine, like, what if? So I love this idea that you were like, well, what if we just taught the concepts and the elements of music, which is really what we're supposed to be doing anyway.
Right.
But what if we focused on the elements and the concepts and we just taught it without focusing on the class? Like, what would happen if we didn't focus on the classics and classical, like the big C genre of music? I love this idea. I love the way that you embraced, and your team embraced, like, what if we just see what happens, right? And clearly it's able to be happening, right? Because you have been successfully doing it for 4 years. So I love this idea of, instead of I think teachers get very caught up in like the details of like, well, how would we do it? Instead of reframing it to, well, let's just say that we could, how would we make it work? I love that. And so the other thing I love that you said also was, you thought about all the different genres that could be possible, and then you kind of narrowed it down, with the thought being, how can we just make sure that kids get exposed to lots of different things, so that they are developing the vocabulary through the musical elements and concepts that we still got to teach, but they're developing that vocabulary through being able to critique what they're hearing and being able to say and explain intelligently, right? We're developing their intellect, how they like something or why they don't like something, in this transferable skill. So, I work with music teachers about how do we center the culturally responsive practices. It's not about just the diversity. That's actually the biggest misconception, is that we're just diversifying repertoire. Now we're culturally responsive. No, you're not. It's not about that. It's about developing these skills and developing the ability to think about thinking, really, right? That metacognitive piece. That's really how we tap into the culture, and we do it through our students' cultural lens. And of course, we want to be diverse, right? But the idea that we can now take this skill of critique and intellectually be able to describe why I like something, why I don't like something, using the musical elements and concepts. You can use that in English class to discuss a text, right? You can use that in your history class to discuss something, right? That's really how we get to this culturally responsive practice. Whereas, just like I was saying before, I want my students to develop the skills through the process, so that they can now go off and do it on their own. They don't need me to stand next to them and tell them this. They have developed the learn to learn skills to now be able to do it themselves. And I love this idea of we're still going to teach the concepts and the skills, right? But we don't have to be tied to one particular genre of music. And I would also, and you tell me, I would also imagine that for your students who, if I remember correctly, beautifully diverse area, right, in Passaic, I would imagine for your students that being able to see, to normalize that we don't have to study this classical music, that like school music is the same music that my aunt listens to, that my parents listen to. It's not a matter of I go to school and I have to like shed this part of myself. This is just music, period. I would imagine that for your kids, that's a powerful experience. Could you talk a little bit more about like for your students, how have they experienced kind of this turning around and reimagining that you all have done?
It's been really interesting. So when we first launched this program, we actually launched it in the fall of 2020. We went crazy, right? We went ham trying to put it all together. And so that time we were home. So we were, fully remote, and, the teachers would go on and play, and we would see parents doing stuff like in the back of the little Zoom mirror and the Google Meet mirror, like, oh shit, like, are you really playing that, Mark Anthony? And we're like, yes, we are. And they're like, you think that that's okay to play in school? And I'm like, I do. And it was like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
That's the response that we were getting a lot from our families. So, and then the kids were like, oh, I love that song. And we did everything from, we did like marching band music. We did HBCU marching bands, and we were comparing and contrasting. Right? What sounds the same? What sounds different? What do you like about this? I love the uniform. Oh, I like the ladies who dance. I like that part. And it was like great because it was a way to show them culturally all the beautiful dimensions of the country.
Yeah.
And so when we went to country music, and we started with bluegrass, we did pop, we did country rap. There was just like, oh, I didn't even know they had country rap. Right? Because who's telling you that? And there's some interesting things about our society now that are a little bit different than when we were in school. We didn't have as many choices as it came for entertainment, news, pop culture. So to a certain degree, we all knew the same stuff. And now that's not the case, right? Because you don't know the context of which somebody's coming from. So we really wanted to make sure that we just exposed students, right? We wanted to make sure that they were clear, they were consistent, they were concise, they understood, they had the opportunity to just experience. And we got great reviews from students, and we got great reviews from parents. And I'll be honest with you, I'd say some teachers were fully on board because they helped create it, and some teachers were completely not. And it was like, well, why would we be learning this? This isn't even real music. And I was like, okay, let's take a time out, friends. Right? Because let's go back to what are the elements of music. And so when we started talking about it from that lens, we did have to support and educate ourselves as in a unit about what are our biases towards music and where do we develop those biases. I'm a music person. I went to a music school, 5-year program, studied voice. And I remember having to argue very firmly to sing a gospel song in my senior recital. And it was permitted. And I had an incredible vocal teacher, Dr. Jim Imhoff, who had my back in that. But I got to tell you, that fight was not cute. And it was like, okay, well, what do I need to do? Because this is a problem for me. Because we are still working with the barriers of being inclusive of all musical genres. And so the best part is I have one particular teacher. She's so lovely. She's so talented. She plays in a ton of ensembles all over. She does stuff worldwide. She's just very, very, very talented. Medieval music is her expertise.
Oh, okay.
And I've seen her grow and develop because she's like, oh, this is amazing. Because, she's like, I didn't always think these things were music, but I'm really glad that I look at it through the elements now. because
Ooh,
the
yeah.
elements is what makes it.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the shift. So, and then of course, we're really educating kids. We're reinforcing elements all the time.
Right.
So when they go home and they listen to music and they walk back in, it's like, oh, let me tell you what I heard. And we love to see kids' eyes light up.
Yeah.
When we talk about student engagement and student centered, we are constantly looking at the songs and all the pieces that we share with our students to make sure that we're evolving, keeping up with what's going on. And
Yeah.
so I'll just talk about the elephant in the room, because you know that people are thinking, I'm not playing hip hop because somebody's gonna get me in trouble.
Yep. I was going to ask about that.
You're not
Yep.
playing reggaeton. Yeah, we are playing that too. Now,
Yeah.
how can you do that? You have to do it responsibly. So one
Right.
of the pieces that we do is, listen, I'm gonna put it out there, right? Because people are like, oh my God. Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We all know the content. Okay,
Yes.
you can't play that content in school,
No.
right?
No.
The children know that content. Yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
do.
who do you think you're fooling?
Right.
Right? Because there's a lot that's not like when I was a kid, when everything came on after 9 p.m. and I was in bed.
Mhm.
Everything's on all the time, right?
Yep.
So what we try to do was small things like, okay, we can't play the lyrics, and we can discuss the general topic and why is this topic controversial. Let's make
Mhm.
sure it's a school appropriate conversation, right?
Mm.
And you might be able to do that with older students.
Right.
We can also bring in the beat.
Yeah.
We can analyze, the composition of that.
Mhm.
Sure, it's digitally made. Okay, but analyzation is analyzation. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We can critique it and say, well, what gave this song the what we felt? What was it? What gives
Right.
you that mood? Why do you think they were able to write lyrically to that? Can we rewrite these lyrics and make it about a topic that we can talk about?
Yeah.
All those are ways to analyze the music, bring it into the classroom, make it relevant and important without having to say, oh my gosh, I feel like I broke 7 rules. You haven't
Yes.
broken it. And showing kids that, okay, we know that this is something that you're hearing. Let's use it for good, right?
Mhm.
And listen, I call it leveraging students, which is really cultural responsive pedagogy, right? You are
Yes.
leveraging their students' knowledge base for what you
Right.
need. Or I mean, I used to ask kids, why do you even like that song?
Yes.
And it was great because they were like, I don't know, it's got a good beat. We're sitting here arguing as adults about the
Right.
lyrical content. That beat is banging. That's
Yeah.
all the kids are saying, right?
Yeah.
And so what we started to find out was a lot of the stuff was they're not even listening to
Right.
the words. Like,
They have no idea a lot of times what they're even
right,
saying. Yep.
right? Or I love the misinterpretation of lyrics. That's the best thing ever. Because
Right.
I still do it myself or something.
Me
For
too.
some of the songs I love and I know. And so we just used it as a way to guide students. So I thought it's really great. And what I'm enjoying is that now students are saying they're bringing songs to us.
Yes.
And so it's like, great, and then we say, what genre? What do you think we should replace? And that's something we're trying to do, get some more student agency. And as a speaker, Alice Hamill says, students have always had voices. We just need to amplify them higher so that
Yeah.
we can listen to them.
I love that. I love that. Alice was one of my graduate professors when I was doing my master's. I love Alice.
I just saw her like a month ago. She was here. I'm bringing her back up soon.
Yay!
Oh,
Shout out to Alice
awesome.
Cameron. Yes. I love it. I love that. I love everything about what you just said. And I love that you went there. You maybe actually think about a few weeks ago, I did an online workshop. Sometimes I do online things for teachers that they can come in, tune in from anywhere. And a teacher asked me, a lot of my students listen to rap and all this kind of stuff, and I don't know, and I don't really know how to bring it into the classroom. And I love that. I get that question quite often, so I love that you answered it. And I love that you made it about like, well, what is it that the kids like about the music, right? You don't need to like I don't like every genre. I mean, I like a lot of genres of music because I am a music lover, right? But I don't love every single genre of music, nor is anybody asking you to like everything, nor is anybody even asking you to know everything, right? How are we leveraging what the students know? Culturally responsive teaching, right? Leveraging what they know to be able to help them make the connections to the musical concepts and elements that we're teaching. And I love your point about, well, let's just ask them, what is it that they actually like, right? Because a lot of times Of course, you know, I would always joke with my kids, like, I like the same music that you do, like, but we can't play it in the classroom because I'm going to get fired, right? But I love the things that you do. But what we can do is talk about what is it that we love about this music, right? Like the lyrics are probably not appropriate for my fifth graders, but there are elements of the music that draw us in, right? So instead of focusing so much on the literal lyrics, which, by the way, as you said, a lot of our kids, they don't even know what they're saying. They're just singing. It's kind of like when I remember when I was, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent. I remember when I was like 8 or 9. Do you know that group Next?
Too close.
That's the song. Yes. The way
Oh my
I was
God.
in the car jamming to Too Close, singing about a little bump coming through. What was I talking about?
Girl,
I
like,
didn't know what I was
now. I listen to some of our songs and I'm like,
what was
my
I
mother, my poor
right.
mother. My mother must have been like, turn it off. Go pray in a corner.
My mother was not. She was driving the car. I'm like, why was she letting me like in the back sing along to that? Anyway,
but, right? Like we put sometimes more on things than it needs to be. We're not even understanding that it's like this. And I look I was talking to my girlfriend the other day, and we were talking about I said Shirley Murdoch's As We Lay.
Oh yeah.
And we're like, we were jamming. We was like, did you have any idea what that song's like? I said, I had no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, or was it or Woman to Woman? I don't, Secret Lovers. I love Atlantic Star. You can't tell me nothing. But you know, I don't know that I understood the context. And I would say multiple meaning of it, which, okay, you want to go ahead and do an interdisciplinary connection. Here we go, ELA, come through.
Right, yeah.
Multiple meaning words, how phrases can be put together and can basically mean simultaneously the same thing. If you think about that, a lot of hip hop, rap music is really like throwing that all the way up in such higher order ways. And I mean, listen, today's music's, I think, a little bit more literal. So it doesn't use it as much. But if you are listening to really, I would say like mid 80s to mid 90s rap and hip hop, the amount of vocabulary I did not realize I learned listening to hip hop was insane. Listen, I am Jersey, you know, born and raised, what I call it with a lot of sprinkling in North Carolina. I mean, we lived in the heart of hip hop.
Yeah.
And the amount of vocabulary I learned from Public Enemy.
Yeah.
Because I would have to go get a dictionary, like, what is that word? I've never heard that word. And so it's just giving more, you know, ammunition to the power of how music can really help us and guide us. And I call it leverage the learning. We don't have to do it all as educators in the classroom. Our kids are coming in with so much richness that if we just ask them, just ask them and give them a little bit of space to share, we wouldn't have to work so hard. I was thinking about, I was a kid who grew up in church. So I went to church, I don't know, like 4 days a week. Like I was always in church. My parents were deacons and deacon. I was always in church, right? But I remember going into music class. Listen, we know how to make this music rock. And I grew up, again, here in Jersey, where we had, you know, piano and drum set and stuff like that. But my grandparents were in North Carolina, where we had a washboard and some tambourines. So I know rhythm, but you're going to try to come tell me about rhythm?
Right.
Like, I know rhythm in a way that you, listen, we make this rock for 14 minutes of shouting here, right? So if I can do that, imagine if teachers just asked. And we had tons of kids who took piano lessons or who played with their families as, you know, as actually just family time, playing salsa and cumbia and bachata. And you have all of this ammunition from these students who are walking in the door. We have to utilize it because it would allow us to move our program so much further, so much further.
It would. You're making me actually think of, in my last year of teaching, one of my students, and he was a little bit of a tough one. But what I learned from talking to his parents was he was like a completely self-taught church musician. He could play the drum set. He could play piano completely by ear. And so what I did was I leaned on basically his knowledge and his excitement about music. And I remember one day he said to me, because I was asking him like, hey, well, can you just like, can you play something for us? Let's see if we can do something. Like we're learning, I think we were learning about like ostinatos, like repeated rhythmic patterns. Like, can you play something for like something you know, or can you make something like on the piano? Can you play something for us? And I remember he said something to me that I was like, man, that's the problem. He was saying, well, I know all this different stuff, blah, 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 but it's not like real school music. And I was like, that is what it is. Like there's still a disconnect between him being, I'm like, that's an incredible musician that you can do, like you are completely, he was just like at church would watch the older musicians and he figured out how to do that. That's incredible that you were able to do that. But there's still this piece that I have not figured out how to make, it's my fault, right? I haven't figured out how to make it clear to you that what you know, what you do is so wonderful.
Valuable.
It is just as valid and just as real as anything else that we're doing in class. And I want to go back to one thing that you said before about your teachers, right? So you had teachers that helped you to develop this new way. And then you had teachers, I'm sure, that were just part of the movement, right? They weren't necessarily part of the writing process. And I love the point that you said about some of your teachers mentioned, like, well, this is not real music. This is not the school music. But that's really belying of bias, right? So that then pulls us into like the other part of culturally responsive and equitable teaching practices. It has to really start with you, right? Investigating who you are, what are your frames of reference? Because if you are thinking that particular pieces of music are not valid or not real, but that's the music that your students are going to connect with, right? To learn those concepts, like you are the barrier and obstacle in your program that's going to keep your kids from having that equitable access. And I'm going to keep saying this over and over again, that a lot of times, and I learned this myself, so I'm talking to myself too, but a lot of times us, the teacher, the music teacher, like we are the reason why our students are struggling, because we are holding on to our own way that we want to experience, that we're excited to, music teachers, we get so excited about what we learned, right? Now we want to do it, that we forget that we're teaching kids that are in a whole other generation from us. Their experiences, their lived experiences are different. And in order for us to foster that love that we're seeking to foster within our kids, we have to get out of the way. We have to not be the bottleneck in our own classroom. And so I'd love for you to talk a little bit about like, how did you coach some of those teachers through that piece of kind of overcoming or maybe they haven't, I don't know, but how did you coach them through like getting from this is not real music, struggling maybe a little bit with the bias piece, to being able to implement this beautiful, rich musical course kind of programming?
Sure. So I tell you that the first thing I realized was it was going to be an uphill battle. And some were like, okay. And there were some who were like, absolutely not. Like full disclosure. And so I said, okay, well, who would like to launch a program? And so what we did was we did this for the K-5 perspective, but then simultaneously we also started expanding and implementing modern band. And so we partnered, I was really kind of inspired by the Music Will Foundation to do this work. I went to a workshop, I waited a year to get in that workshop, and I walked out of there saying, we need to shift what we do. So that's what really initiated the whole idea. And I knew already we were struggling with numbers and keeping kids engaged and just all the things, right? Because listen, concert band is beautiful, but there are elements to it, just like modern band is beautiful and there's elements to it, right? And like you said, it doesn't hit for everyone. So the first thing I did to coach teachers was give them opportunities of choice. Would you like to try this? So those who wanted to try were like, oh my God, this is so hard. I said, but is it hard or is it different? Oh, okay, it's different. It's not hard.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We can deal with different. Okay. What do we need to set up? And it was a lot of growing in the process. Okay, I need this, I need that. And so the thing that really kind of helped to shift was two of my staff members and I went to the summit, the Modern Band Summit. Oh, yeah. And we kind of experienced it together. We hung out together and we saw the possibilities. Yeah. And so that came back and it was a slow go. I wouldn't say it took us about 4 years to kind of get this going. So we brought it back and then another teacher did it. And then we had some professional development offered. And then it was like, oh, I like this. Okay, I could try this. All right, we're going to get you some instruments. We're going to get you what you need. And I never forget the biggest compliment I'll say was I had a staff member who was adamantly like, I'm not doing it. And I was like, I'm not gonna do it. And I was like, why don't you just try? And I kept going with the try. I call it the soft encouragement. They tried, and they have one of the strongest programs in the district.
That's awesome.
That's been featured. And she actually shared the story at her concert in front of about 700 parents saying, I didn't want to do this and I thought I wasn't going to do it. But when I did it and I saw the joy on my kids' faces, a joy that I didn't see them doing in some of my other ensembles, I knew I had to keep going. And so what we've done is little by little, we just keep expanding. And there's some people who haven't. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think some people feel like it's overwhelming. I also feel like it feels foreign. So it's nothing that the way that we operate from a modern band perspective, and for us, modern band in our district, what we've defined it as, that's anything that is not a concert band, concert orchestra, and concert choir. It's anything. So if you have a rock band, that's modern band. If you have a hip hop group, that's that. If you've got a quartet, if you've got a barbershop, if you've got a K-pop group, if you've got a metal group, it's anything.
I love that.
So what we found in these 5.5 years that we've launched this is that more students keep coming to us. And we find ourselves leveraging those students between both our concert band, concert choir, concert orchestra program, as well as modern band. And so it's a slow process, but I think what's most important is the kids feel seen. They feel like they can add their twist. We give them a lot of love and joy and just the creative process that I call it the tinkering. They tinker. And they're like, how many times do kids get to do that in school?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Right? So
just play around with stuff, right?
And now I gave teachers permission to tinker. And how many times do they get to tinker and not feel like hammers coming down? And it's like, like sometimes they'll do it like, oh my gosh, we totally bombed. I'm like, okay, well, what do we get from that? Okay, I got to hack this setup. I need this. I need to make sure I know how to change some strings. Okay, let's get you some PD. Okay, let's get you stuff. And it's not been perfect, right? And I say I'm not perfect, right? I'm learning and we're growing in this together. But the beauty I've seen, we just had a concert back in September. And we did a relaunch project with Music Will. And we were privileged to have Wyclef Jean come to our district and speak to our kids. Awesome. And the best part of that whole day, so many things that were great about that day, but the best part about that day, we had kids who played ukulele in 4th grade. We had a high school rock band. We had a elementary school R&B band. We had another elementary school pop band. And the admiration of those kids that I was featured on that stage. And our teachers got to see that, and our community got to see it. And it was celebrated from our mayor to our superintendent, and to colleagues. People were like, yo, that was amazing. It changed what we think music is. And guess what? We still have an incredible, stellar marching band. So we're not taking away from you. It's just adding more to it. So coaching teachers is seeing that we're not replacing anything. Right. It's not replacement. It's not substitution. It's an addition.
Yeah.
So that's the growth process.
I love that. Yeah, it's that making space for just additional things to be possible, right? This reimagining of, well, what if we just made space for it, right? And what would happen? And I love that. First of all, how did you get Wyclef Jean to come? That part of the Music Will?
I know a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. But I have to tell you, he was so gracious with our kids.
I love that.
Our kids were just like, and here's the best part, just to give context.
Yeah.
They were like, who is he?
Yeah, I was gonna say, do they know who Wyclef Jean was? Okay, they didn't. I think
he's like, my friend is DJ Khaled.
Oh yeah, now they have a connection.
They're like, that's my man. But think about that from a generational perspective, right? Now in the district, all like the teachers they were like, no, get me, I want to get in. But like, what that told me is that we have more to do, right? So we started the year off with that. And so this year we're ending the year off. I'm so grateful to our great mayor, who was a former classmate of mine, our mayor, Mayor Hector Laura in Passaic. He was like, "Oh, I want to see this more. I want our kids performing more." And now him and his incredible team are working with us to let our students launch the summer concert series for the city.
I love
So like
that.
our kids are going to be doing a full concert, and like how incredible to say I'm in the concert that
Mhm.
launches for our community.
Yeah.
So again, I want to bring those realistic opportunities. And listen, in all types of ways. And I said, you pick what you want to perform.
Yeah.
It's not for me to tell you. So we've got folks who are doing some classical stuff, some jazz stuff, some pop, some rock. We have a full-blown music technology program. So our
Mhm.
student DJs are going to be, orchestrated and creating the move for it, because there's a space for everyone, right? It's
Yeah.
not just that one piece. And that's what's really important to me about making sure that music education creates a space
Mhm.
where everyone can be a part of it,
I
because
love
it
that.
only makes us better and stronger. It does. Us closing down, like you said, creating those bottlenecks and being gatekeepers, it doesn't help our
Mhm.
cause at
Right.
all.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Two things I love about what you just said that I got from, first of all, that's awesome that you had that partnership. And as you at first when you said Wyclef Jean, I'm like, first of all, I'm excited, but then I'm like, wait, your students probably don't know. But I love that though, because the advocacy, right? So for the teachers, for the mayor, for the community, the parents, right? To be able to see this great connection. I mean, the advocacy that you have that you and your team, right, your teachers have led, that's incredible, right? For the students to be able to see that what they do matters beyond just the four walls of their class. That's what we want, right? We want what we do to matter beyond just we learned an instrument or we learned a song. And the second thing that I love is that how you're bringing the community aspect into it as well, right? So the kids are not just learning music and playing it for themselves, but you're having these events that allow for the community to be a part of it. And now this even bigger way of having them kick off the summer concert series. Like what a beautiful way to see culturally responsive teaching in action. Because I think one piece that many folks leave out when we talk about culturally responsive practices is that there also needs to be like a community aspect of it as well, right? How are you bringing the community into your classroom, but also how are you bringing your kids to the community to learn through the
Right.
actual lived experiences that they're experiencing? I think that's something that we miss a lot, and I know I need to be better about with my teachers that I work with, talking about that community piece, right? It's not just about we got a great lesson plan. How is it mattering to the lives of your
Yes.
students? And then even further, as we advocate for music to be more than just the notes on the page, just that concert, just that
Yep.
play, how are we also bringing our parents and our families and our communities in to see the great work that our kids are doing
Mhm.
beyond just the four walls of our classroom? I think that what you all have done in Passaic is such a beautiful case study of like what is possible when a team just says, let's just try something. Let's just see what happens.
It's
Yeah.
crazy because I go out and I talk about what we're doing and I'm learning. So I learned from my great friends in Bridgewater Raritan School District, which is here also in New Jersey, two amazing stellar teachers who I call them the dynamic duo. Happens to be a husband and wife duo who teach at two
Oh,
different schools.
oh, great.
They actually modeled how to actually bring in family members who
Mm,
are performing on instruments, whether that's from a recreational perspective or a professional perspective,
mhm.
in to then educate and create these very unique units about very specific genres of music and their community. So they have a very large Southeast Asian population. And
Okay.
so going to hear them and hearing their work has inspired me. So the next level of work for me is okay, great. We've got this going, but the work is not done. It's
Yeah.
now time. I need to find our community musicians. I need to bring them in.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. One of our we have a student at one of our high schools who participates in a cumbia band with his
Oh,
family.
cool.
Like the family has this band.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows that this student is like a full blown experienced performer.
Hmm.
And I'm like, wow, we need to bring them in because
I
we
love
need
that.
them to now come in. Either live, a workshop, a little mini concert,
Yeah.
teaching us some very specific rhythmic patterns in music. We need to do that.
Yeah.
And so that's the next level, right? Of saying, how do we bring in the community to see
Hmm.
it? So then it's like, it's not just us, the teachers, talking, but us
Yeah.
also modeling that we are lifelong learners, that we can
Mhm.
gain. And so what I think the best part about that is that it really builds this capacity that everyone has expertise and
Mhm.
everyone's viewpoints are valued. And I
Yeah.
think that that's something that sometimes is missed because parents often come to school, they're silent, they sit, they clap, they pick up
Yeah.
their child, and they go home. Nope. You are absolutely relevant. We need you. You have expertise I don't have. And
Mhm.
so can you please teach me?
Yeah.
And what a lovely way to really have like a reciprocal learning environment where our community educates us
Yeah.
just as much as we educate our community. So
Yeah.
that's the next level where, way too many aspirations over here with friend.
I love
But
it.
we're going in. We're gonna
I
make
love
this
it.
happen.
I love it. And I think also what I love in general, just like a common theme that I'm hearing from you, and kind of why I wanted you to like come on and like share this beautiful work that you're doing is I just love your willingness to just like jump in, not fully know like what's gonna happen or how it's gonna be, but just like, hey, let's just go all in, let's figure it out. Let's continue to learn and evolve along the way. And let's not be stagnant, right? Let's continue to figure out what's the next thing, what's the next, because there's always going to be a next thing. I feel like
Yeah, for sure.
unfortunately in education we're all burned out and we're tired, so we're always looking for this like shortcut. How can I just have a lesson plan I do year after year after year? But that's to the detriment of this beautiful learning that really speaks to the learned experiences, the lived knowledge that our kids have when we don't allow ourselves to continue to evolve and to also work with our kids to continue to go to the next thing, right? I always say to people, one of the things I love most about my work kind of is at this intersection of like DEI and music, because what we do is culture, right? Music is a reflection of culture. One of the beautiful things I love about it is that, and also a hard thing too, is that literally music reflects the times and the people, right? The music comes from somebody created it for some reason. It may have been a really silly purpose. They just needed to remember how to tie their shoes, right? But that song came from some person with some purpose and some reason. And so I think when we think about that piece, right, that music is always a reflection of culture, and thus because culture is always evolving, we have to always evolve with it. I think when we focus on that piece, that's where some of this beautiful work, like you have demonstrated for us, that's where a lot of the beautiful work happens. And I think that's more exciting. I think it's more exciting. I always got excited when my students I always would challenge my students, we're learning about whatever concept or skill. I would always challenge them. You've heard this before. Listen on your phone tonight, listen in the car. Who's going to come back to me with an example of where you heard this? And I would always challenge them, like, can you find an example of this? I know you've heard it. Can you come back with it? And I would love that when first they realized I was serious. I really do want you to come back to me with like examples of where you've heard, I don't know, where you heard like verse and refrain, or where you heard a bridge. Really come back to me. But I loved also when they would introduce me to stuff that I had never heard of. It's my students actually who, and I love Bad Bunny now, but I had never heard of Bad Bunny. And so one of my students was like, hey, you got to listen to this. Now, first of all, I still never found a piece that I could play for my kids because there was always something going on in the lyrics. But I was able to take other elements from the music that he has so wonderfully created to be able to bring that to my students. But I never would have known about that or made that connection if I hadn't kind of been vulnerable enough with my students to kind of challenge them to like, hey, like I need more ideas. Can you come and bring me some ideas from music that you know? And can we use that? Like I don't know that I ever would have just come. Well, I probably would have. I think at this point, but I don't know that at that time I would have come across an
Sure.
artist like Bad Bunny had I not um,
Ask them.
yeah, had I not done that and just said, hey, bring me more. I need more ideas. Can you help me with that? Right. And now I'm able to evolve with the times because I don't listen to all the same music that my students do, and nor do I need to, right? But I, as an educator who's committed to making sure that my students get the best experience, that means I have to go deep. And the only way to go deep is to start with what they already, I can't just introduce things they don't know, right? I got to start with what they know, right? And so I think a fear oftentimes I hear that teachers have is like, they're afraid of not knowing. They're afraid of kids bringing things in that are not going to. You got to just be willing to embrace just jumping in and finding out what's going to happen, right? Like it's not going to be perfect, right? But you're never going to know if you don't just get in there and try.
So I think that that's super important. And I'll tell everybody that Bad Bunny Yes, I know there's some lyrical content. He's a huge, huge supporter of education. You
Yes.
can
Yeah.
find a ton of his quotes that are out there that you can do. So one of our ELA supervisor, shout out to her. She actually took all of his positive quotes and they put them all in a school. So because we know that there's an influence by this gentleman with the students that we serve. So what do? We are leveraging the pieces that we can use in our schools because he talks about making sure that you read, gaining as much education as you can, knowing that knowledge is power. So there are ways that you can utilize some of the roles and the impact and the influence of folks, even though you may not like all the pieces that they share, and help. And I have to tell you, like when kids started finding out, oh, Bad Bunny thinks you should read, the reading participation went through the roof. So there's ways to do it. And, it's just listening. That's it. It's listening. It's funny. Kids have so much. They live so much and they experience so much. Just take a minute and listen to them.
Yeah.
Just listen. Hear them.
Yeah.
It's just, and I try to do that with my own kids. Like I have 3 kids of my own. And, this teenage life is crazy. I have all teenagers. So it's a lot. But I have to tell you, it's just taking a minute and just hearing. Right. And we're not going to agree on all things. Right. But listening and saying, okay, you got to say that. I wasn't aware of that. Thank you for educating me. Makes a huge difference.
Right. You don't need to be the keeper of all the knowledge. It's not possible, nor is that helpful either.
Listen, I tell people, you're working too hard. Teachers work too hard. Your students know so much more than you know. Engage in conversation and ask them. You'd be more than surprised to know the information, the insight, and most important, the connection. That brings us right back to where we started when we started talking about the standards. What are the artistic processes? Composing. They need to be able to create their own music. If they're not creating their own music, then we're not doing our jobs, right? We can't have 17 composers do all the work. There's so many folks that have perspective. Performing, we know that. We're great at that. We don't have to worry. But connecting and responding and then being able to make the connections between two things, compare and contrast, and then being able to respond and share why I feel the way I feel, why I think the way I think, why it moves me the way it moves me. Listen, if we could just do that and work on those pieces, man, oh man, would we see the great connections that would be present in there. It's amazing.
Yes, because that's literally thinking about your own thinking that you're able to
cognition.
Exactly, right? And that's what we want, right? When people say, I know what is culturally responsive teaching, how do I do it, et cetera, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about diverse repertoire, although yes, we want that, right? But that's not about it, right? How are we helping our students gain these learn to learn skills so that they can go out and be intellectual members of our global society who can think for themselves and who can critique and who can engage in discourse with folks in a respectful way, right? But still be able to engage in a discourse. That's what we're trying to teach kids. And I think us as music educators, the vehicle of music is such a beautiful way for us to be able to help our kids to gain these skills. And it's my mission to help more music educators see how it's so much more than just performing, right? We got creating and responding and connecting. There's so many missed opportunities when we're only doing concerts. There's so many things that because you're missing the connection that your kids could be making between what they know and what concepts you're trying to teach them, right? There's so many more beautiful things that we can be accomplishing and setting our kids up better for their lives, because they're not going to be in our music class forever. And the truth is, most of them are not going to be music educators or professional musicians. So do they really need to know some of these, do they really need to know how to play the recorder? Not necessarily, right? But they do need to know how to engage with other folks. They need to know how to think. They need to know how to creatively solve a problem, right? And really, that's our society right now. Is we need innovators. As as we talk about like AI coming through and taking over all these different things, like that's just innovation, right? So we need people who can be innovative, who can see a problem and figure out a solution to get to it. And we don't get there by just doing concerts and learning scales, right? We get there by helping kids to be able to engage in a deeper level. And we only get there if we start with what they know, right? Culturally responsive teaching really is the way to get to that equitable piece. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's it. And it all starts with just one decision, right? Let's make some space and room. And once you know it, it shifts. And it's what we need in our content, because we need everything we can to make sure we can advocate and create strong and consistent policy so that our content isn't an option or a decision or a choice. It's a mandated thing that everyone needs, because the arts are critical and they are a reflection of our society. Let's just make sure that it's that and it's consistent in our schools.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's, as I said before, like what you have kind of demonstrated for is that advocacy piece, right? Advocating and showing the community that what the arts represent is not just necessary, but it is vital. Yeah. It's vital, right? It's an advocacy piece part as well. I love it. I love it. There's like so many more things I want to talk about, but I know we're getting to the end of our time. I knew we were going to go over. I knew it. I just get so excited talking to you and my other just dope friends that I've been able to be so privileged to meet along my travels and going here and there, doing so many beautiful things in this reimagining music education space. So I could go on and on, but we better probably wrap it up for the people. And by the way, I see many folks are tuning in. So hey, I see Dr. Kelly is with us. I see Erica. Thank you so much for those of you who are with us live. And those of you that I know are watching the replay later, thank you so much for continuing to support the show. And so as we end, Latasha, I would love to hear any like last pieces of advice that you might have for any of our listeners who are thinking about how to diversify their music course offerings, where to get started. Like, how would I even start to begin that conversation, whether they're an art supervisor like you, or if they're just a teacher who's looking to make more space? What would some parting pieces of advice be for them?
Okay, first thing, stop trying to make the decisions. Ask kids. They're going to tell you. Survey them. Create a super simple survey. Ask your students. Ask them what they want. Give them a menu, because sometimes you can't just give it like, well, what do you want? Like, think about it. Like, find out what's going on out there. I can tell you, like, between music technology, music history classes that talk about more relevant, maybe more recent music, that fuse music from, classical pieces all the way through. Like, figure out a way to build the bridges, but ask your students. Once you ask your students, use that data to advocate to your administrators. Let them know this is what students are saying they'd like. And then start to just ask them and pull in one piece at a time, right? It can be overwhelming, but one piece at a time. It's like, it's how do you tackle a task? You break it up and we chunk it, right? That's a big ELA thing. We tell kids, take a word, chunk it into pieces, and then you can eventually pull the whole work together and you'll be able to say it. Do the same thing with this type of program. Quality over quantity. You don't have to throw out a program. You can just reduce how much you do. So if you're a concert band and you're like, let's put in something from a modern band perspective. Okay, maybe you did 5 pieces every concert, do 3 and make room for 2 more.
Yeah.
That's simple. And then get out there and go to professional development. Our content totally needs that more than ever, because we unfortunately get the least amount. So go to conferences, sign up for town halls, talk to people in other districts. If you can, reach out to people like Ashley. She does great work. Bring her into your district. Talk to people like me who are doing it. If you don't have an art supervisor, holler, let us know. Because I know sometimes it feels daunting when you're there. Maybe you're teaching and you're running and you're doing all the things. Reach out, because there's so many people who want to support and learn and grow. But I would totally tell you, get to those conferences. I mean, Ashley and we met at a conference.
Yeah, we did.
And it was like so many of us. We had a whole crew.
Yeah, it was too much fun.
Right. We had too much fun. And then the best part was we learned. And then it's like, hey, okay, well, let me talk with you. And we're all trying to build. There's a lot of people out there. You're not by yourself. And definitely know that when you're doing this work, you are bringing in social emotional learning. You are bringing in culturally responsive pedagogy. You are letting your children be seen and heard. And nothing makes a person, I don't care if you're a teacher, a child, a student, administrator, nothing makes a person feel better than feeling seen and heard. And that's something that we all need more of. So I would say start there, and then keep going. There's a lot of good stuff out there, and there's more to come for sure.
Yeah. I love it. That is such beautiful advice. Excellent. I love it. That's a great place to start. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Latasha, Dr. Casterlow-Lalla. Thank you so much for being here tonight. This was such a good conversation, and I know our listeners our listeners here live and our listeners that are listening back, they're going to get so many gems from this really rich conversation.
Wait, can I do one more? Look, Pug.
Yeah.
Watch out. Chattel House Publishing Company is coming. It is coming. We are looking for writers to talk about all the things from pedagogical strategies to people sharing the stories of their lives, talking about different approaches, music, art. We are trying to capture those people who want to share their stories and highlight them because we know that every story deserves to be told. So look out for more to come.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, tell us more about anything that you have coming up.
What else do I have coming up?
Yeah, tell us about anything.
You know me. I keep it moving. We do a lot. I do a lot. Follow me on the gram, Dr. Shanae and J9. I'm on Facebook, Latasha Casterlow. And you can always reach out. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Dr. Latasha Casterlow-Lalla. So much more to come. With doctoral studies behind me and dissertations finished and published, time is of the essence, and there's so much more of it, and so much more to do, because collectively together, each of us can make music education so much better, and we will, and we can.
Yes, I love it, and I can't wait to see, now that you have some more space, like what additional things that you're going to be able to get into. It's going to be fun.
Me too.
I can't wait. I love it. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Latasha, and to our listeners. Thank you so much for listening in, continuing to support the show. I see many of you coming back to listen every week. Thank you so much. If you have not yet, make sure that you click the subscribe button if you're on YouTube listening, to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and make sure you follow me on your favorite social media platform. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all the places. And be sure to share this episode with a music educator that you know needs to hear this message. Make sure also that you're on my email list every week. That's where I send notifications about our new episodes, new articles that I'm writing, as well as my weekly notes, which is my newsletter I send every Friday, where I share our consulting firm's latest news, our new services, and also a weekly curated resource list. You can sign up by going to my website, www.ashleycuthbertson.com. And if your team is looking for professional development and instructional coaching, reach out to me and let's chat. I would love to be able to support your team and your district. Thank you again. Yes. So call me and let me know how I can support you and your team. Now, especially as we are getting into the summer and the fall, this is a great time to get a conversation going about what that could look like for your team, to get some support around culturally responsive music, right? Music professional development. So thank you again, Dr. Latasha, and everybody out there listening. We will see you again next time on the Music Equity Chat Show. Bye, everyone.